So, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're dialing in from. I'm Megan, I'm an IBAT Program Officer, and together with me on this webinar are others from the IBAT team. So, we have Rebecca, who is our engagement lead, we have Mark, who is also another Program Officer, and Jake, who is our outreach officer. For those of you who are not aware or do not know about IBAT, so IBAT is the Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool, and we are an alliance of 4 global conservation NGOs, forming from BirdLife International, Conservation International, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN, and also the United Nations Environment Programme World Conservation Monitoring Center, UNEP-WCMC. The platform hosts 3 of the world's most authoritative biodiversity datasets, which are the World Database on Protected Areas, World Database on Key Biodiversity Areas, and the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. You will hear more about all these datasets throughout this webinar. The agenda for the webinar today focuses on how IBAT can help organizations with various reporting regulation frameworks and standards, but also how you can then use this reporting to guide you through to the next steps of taking action for a nature positive transition. We will kick off with a quick overview of the current disclosure landscape and then dive into the IBAT functionalities which you can use to help you navigate these nature-related reporting. There is also a Q&A function on this Zoom webinar, so feel free to put your questions as we go along the way, and we will have 15 minutes towards the end to go through some of the questions that you have. As we will not be covering the basics of IBAT, and if you're not really familiar with IBAT, feel free to head over to our website to watch an IBAT overview video. The link will be put in the chat, and we will be happy to follow up with you after this webinar. So to get started, I'll hand the time over to Rebecca to start us off with a quick overview of the disclosure landscape.
Thank you very much, Megan, and welcome everybody to the webinar. Hopefully you can all hear me. Before we dive into the disclosure preparation report, I wanted to take a step back and really think about biodiversity landscape reporting as a whole, because the whole thing is moving really, really fast, and it's important to see where each of the different pieces fit. So over the last few years, biodiversity has gone from being a relative side topic to a core part of mainstream corporate and financial reporting. And this is largely driven by a growing recognition that biodiversity loss is a material risk, economically, socially, and environmentally. And there have been conversations about how best to ensure interoperability between the various regulations, frameworks, and standards as well, which I'm sure we'll go into later on. At the heart of this shift in the EU, for example, there's the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Initiative, which is linked to the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. Under this, companies must disclose how they affect and are affected by environmental and social issues as a step one. And specifically looking at ESRS E4, biodiversity and ecosystems, this is now mandatory for larger companies. And it requires several things. Description of impacts on species, ecosystems and services, location-specific biodiversity risks and opportunities, and metrics like proximity to the protected areas that Megan mentioned and endangered species. And this all makes spatial biodiversity data and the ability to interpret it central to compliance. If we look globally, then we also have the TNFD, which many of you will be familiar with. This is the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. And it recently released its final recommendations. And it's modelled after the TCFD, which many of you will be familiar with on the climate side. And it's already being picked up by financial institutions, asset managers, regulators, and the like. And it encourages location-based assessment and nature risk evaluation, and it aligns well with tools, again, that offer geospatial insights. And I believe over 500 organisations have now signed up, and it's about $17.7 trillion of assets under management are now committed to TNFD aligned risk management and corporate reporting, which is a real shift. Elsewhere, there's GRI, or the Global Reporting Initiative, and whether you are currently reporting against GRI 304 Biodiversity 2016 or the GRI 101 Biodiversity 2024, they both focus on organisations having to understand several things. Those include operational sites in or near protected areas, impacts on threatened species, and mitigation strategies. And GRI works well because it provides structure and comparability. It's often used alongside ESG ratings and investor frameworks as well. And if you're looking at GRI 101, it focuses on the complete value chain beyond direct operations. And there are others too, other frameworks. There's the International Sustainability Standards Board linked with IFRS, easy for me to say, which is now considering incorporating nature-related standards alongside climate. There's the science-based targets for nature, guiding companies to set measurable biodiversity goals as well. And you also have IFRS, which is linked to ISSB, and the CDP, aligning their disclosures with TNFD as well. And then, of course, you have the national disclosures, national level policies, which are increasingly mandating biodiversity-related reporting metrics into their asks of organisations. So there's a lot going on there and a lot that has moved us to those places. So whether you're preparing for mandatory compliance in the EU or voluntary alignment with the TNFD or even strategic communication through the GRI, there is a real need to locate, assess and interpret biodiversity impacts. And that's best with transparency, it's best with scientifically robust data. So there's a common thread across all of these frameworks, and that's location-based biodiversity insight. It's no longer optional, it's a reporting must-have, and that's where we hope that we can help. Firstly, I will say that there are a lot of tools and platforms out there. No single tool will do everything that you need it to, and we always encourage organisations to explore and see what's best for them. But it should always be grounded in science and ground truthed. On the screen, you can see how IBAT has been referenced across multiple key regulations, frameworks and standards, and even where it isn't mentioned, those data sets that Megan mentioned earlier on, the World Database for Protected Areas, World Database for Key Biodiversity Areas, and the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, will also be mentioned as metrics that organisations can look at to report against the various requirements. So in the rest of this session, we're going to look at IBAT and how the DPR can help meet needs in these areas. Just going to hand over to the next person.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yes, so now we'll dive into the meat of this webinar, where we'll be talking about the new disclosure preparation report, or not really the new one, but the updated disclosure preparation report, and also some of IBAT's functionalities. So the disclosure preparation report, or DPR, is one of the 6 reports available for download on the IBAT platform. The DPR is the newest report, which was launched in July last year and contains information on protected areas, KBAs, the IUCN Red List, and also the STAR metrics. It has been recently updated earlier this month to contain analysis aligned with the CSRD ESRS on top of TNFD and GRI during its initial release. When you download a DPR through the IBAT platform, you will have a folder which contains all 3 PDFs and an Excel. So I'll show you more about some of the outputs of the PDFs as well as the Excels later on through this webinar as well. Using this report, organizations will be able to identify and prioritize sensitive sites in terms of their importance for biodiversity. It's designed to look across a portfolio of up to 1,000 sites at once. Taking a step back, let's look at how to upload sites onto the platform. You can either draw or upload sites here. To draw it on the map, you have the option of simply dropping a point or drawing a line or polygon. And once you're done, you can then name the site, select the most relevant site type, and operation type. Thereafter, this site will be saved in your platform. Alternatively, if you have existing sites information, you can also choose to bulk upload them through any of these file formats. You'll be able to upload up to 3,000 sites at once. And when you upload multiple sites, there will also be an option for you to create a portfolio. The time in which it takes for sites to upload depends on how many you are looking at. So here you can name your portfolios, and all this would then be uploaded onto your own platform itself. If you have existing sites on your profile, which are not uploaded in the same Excel or shapefile, you can also select them on the main page, edit to a portfolio. This function also allows you to assign site types here to multiple sites at once. The portfolio function allows you to then download the DPR easily instead of having to select individual sites from the main page. It is recommended to have at most 1,000 sites in a portfolio, given that that's the limit to generate a DPR. This is a sample Excel template, which you can also download from the platform itself. You will just have to input the information for these columns. So that's the name of your sites, the latitude, the longitude, point locations. For the site type and operation types, there's a drop-down option which you can select for. After you have done this, you can just save this on your own devices and then upload it onto the platform like I shown earlier. So it is optional to select the site types and operation types, but it will help to guide some outputs of the disclosure preparation report. The site types would determine the buffers that will be applied to each of the site, and the operation type would aid the results output in the DPR. As briefly shown in the previous slide as well, there are multiple ways where you can assign the site and operation types. So that can be when you're uploading your locations or your sites, or after you have uploaded them onto the platform, you can also do so. So we have different buffers here. These buffers are based on a study conducted by the IBAT Alliance partners. We understand that this is a non-exhaustive list, and there might be some of your operations which might not necessarily fit into these 13 different site types here. We would recommend that in this instance, you can then select the site type that would be most related to your operation, or select the site types based on the buffers which you would like to conduct the analysis. For site types that are under the type of others, then a 20 kilometers buffer would be automatically applied. And others would be assigned if, let's say, if you're uploading a location or a project and you do not specifically choose a site type, then others would be there. And it will always be kept at 20 kilometers. So now let's take a look at the methodology behind the DPR and some of the outputs itself. Given the slight differences in methodology for the TNFD GRI aligned report with that of the CSRD ESRS report, I'll talk through them in two parts. So the first part, we'll talk about the TNFD and GRI aligned report. Stage 1 here is aligned with TNFD's and GRI's definition of site sensitivity, where it includes, for example, areas important for biodiversity. In this instance, sites are defined as sensitive if your area of influence, which is your site, and the predetermined buffer, overlaps with a protected area or a KBA. It's also sensitive if the area of influence has star scores exceeding global median values, as stated on the slide. It's also important to note that this report only assesses sensitive sites that are important for biodiversity. It's therefore important to also consider the other TNFD criteria when determining whether a site is sensitive or not. Stage 2 in this report is based on IBAT's methodology, which was a project undertaken in collaboration with TBC. The significance scores here are based on two indicators. So firstly, you can look on the table on the left. It's based on the proximity of sites to the nearest KBA or protected area. So let's take an example of a protected area. If your protected area is 4 kilometers away from your site and your site is an office location, then you would have it as low. However, if you have a protected area 4 kilometers away from a mining location, then the significance score would be high. So this takes into account the different extent of impact of the different operation or site types. The second significance score indicator we have is based on the star scores for each of your site locations. Based on the operation type you have assigned to your site when generating the report, you can see here on the graph the breakdown of sensitive sites by the different operation types. These two other graphs also shows you the percentage and the number of sites which are overlapping with protected areas, with KBAs, or has star scores above the global median values. This is all part of the PDF that you will get from the report download. And the PDF also contains information about interpreting the biodiversity data in relation to the sensitivity of a site. In stage 2, you also have this in the PDF. You get this table here which prioritizes these sensitive locations. So the site at the top would be the one with the highest biodiversity significance based on distances to protected areas and KBAs, and also based on the star metric score. For those of you who would like to see your sites in a visual map, there's also a separate PDF here in the report download where you get individual maps for each of your site location that are defined as sensitive in stage 1. In this map, you can see exactly where your sites are in relation to the protected areas or the KBAs. You can see here the total area of protected areas and KBAs within your area of influence. You can see the buffers that has been assigned to this particular site and where it covers on the map itself. Moving on to the second part, which is the updated DPR. And now we have the one which is aligned with the CSRD ESRS E4. Section 1 in this report defines sensitive sites as those which overlaps with protected areas and or KBAs. The buffers are also pre-assigned based on the site types you have selected as before. So this is the same as what you got in the TNFD GRI report. The difference here is the exclusion of the star or species data when determining site sensitivity because of how we are looking to align with ESRS E4's definition of sensitive areas, which you can see here, only includes protected areas and also key biodiversity areas. In the PDF output, you see here for section 1, you can understand based on operation types, how many of them are sensitive. You also get here the graph which shows you how many of them are overlapping with PAs or KBAs, and then a summary table which summarizes which sites are sensitive or non-sensitive. Is it because it's near a KBA? Is it because it's near a protected area? We then move on to section 2 of this report, where as part of an organization's materiality assessment, the ESRS E4 requires organizations to disclose whether and how it has identified and assessed impacts on biodiversity and ecosystems at their own site locations and in their upstream and downstream value chains. So for this assessment, it also recommends for organizations to use additional species and ecosystem metrics beyond those used to determine whether or not the sites are sensitive to or are close to protected areas or KBAs. So in this report itself, we also have a table which summarizes some of the metrics you can use under the category of species, under ecosystem, and also others. In the PDF output, section 2, you can see here, materiality here, we actually help organizations by prioritizing the sensitive locations. So this is a first step to helping you determine whether or not your sites might be more sensitive and then might be more material to your operations. So significance scores here, the methodology is the same as that on TNFD and GRI. So the low, medium, and high scores are based on the distances of your protected areas and KBAs from the site themselves. In this section as well, you can see that there's a table here. This is just a snapshot of the table, so there's a lot more rows in the PDF where you can find it. You have your metrics group of ecosystems, so that includes things like the number of critically endangered and vulnerable species, which you can find from the overall results Excel. So I'll talk through that later. You have your metric group of species. So that's things like red list category, which you can also find in a separate tab on the Excel, so under species data. And then you also have others. So if you want to read more about this, all of these are available through the sample DPR download on the website. So moving on to the last section in this ESRS E4 aligned report, we talk about how IBAT data can be used for other disclosure requirements within the ESRS E4, such as identifying operations that affect threatened species, and also upstream sites that are located in risk-prone areas. So the output table above, or the output graph above, shows you the number of threatened species that can be found within the area of influence of all of your sites. And because it's not clearly defined in the standards, now what threatened species means, we have taken it to include your critically endangered, and vulnerable species. Note that this overlap of ranges of threatened species with each site includes a 50 kilometers buffer to account for changes and also uncertainties. So this means that even if your site is an office location and only 5 kilometers is applied to protected areas and KBAs, the species would always be kept at a 50 kilometers buffer. Below, you see that we also provide information on supplier sites in risk-prone areas. So suppliers' facilities or supplier sites, that would mean the upstream sites. So when you're uploading your locations, if you have selected upstream under your operation type, then it will be included in this calculation. Risk-prone areas are basically areas where they are sensitive because they have protected areas and or KBAs, and they also have threatened species in the area of influence. So moving on to the Excel, which is also part of the outputs you get from the DPR downloads. This Excel, if you want to have a further look at each of the different data sets from the PDF, then you can look at this Excel itself because it contains information on the overall analysis as seen here, but also specific tabs which shows you deep dive information on each of the different data sets. So the green box, which highlights column H and I, so this is the new addition to the Excel in the update of the DPR, where you will be able to identify if a site is biodiversity sensitive as per ESRS or CSRD's definition, or whether it's ecologically sensitive as per TNFD and GRI's definition in column G. The yellow box here also shows you the summary information, for example, for protected areas. And this is something you would get for KBAs and also for species. So it's just that the Excel has many columns. I only took a screenshot of it. And yeah, feel free to look at the entire Excel when you download the sample report. So these two columns here, it shows you a summary of, how many protected areas are falling in each of the site location, and also the minimum distance of each protected area to the sites themselves. These are the individual Excel. So this is one for protected areas. So in this protected areas Excel here, you can see specifically the overlap of, each protected area with the area of influence. You can see the protected areas and the distances of each protected areas from each site itself. So if a single location has 5 protected areas found within your area of influence, then you would have all 5 different protected areas listed down in this Excel. And this would be the same to that of the KBAs tab. For species itself, if you also want to find out more, this species tab would then list down all the critically endangered, and vulnerable species that are found within 50 kilometers of your site location. So this is more or less what you would get from the DPR and some of the PDF outputs, some of the Excel outputs, and I went through briefly some of the methodology as well. Feel free to take a look at the sample, which can be found on our website. I believe it should be in the chat as well. And we know that reporting is important for many organizations, but reporting should not be the end, and there should be many other steps that can be taken after this. So what we'll do is that For the next part of the presentation, I'll hand it over to Mark, where he will talk about how you can then use some of the results, how you can use the other IBAT functionalities to help you with the next steps of conducting more on-the-ground action and taking action. Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much, Megan, for taking us through the changes that we've made to our disclosure preparation report. I'm going to talk about companies who are interested in potentially taking next steps or understanding more about their biodiversity impacts and dependencies. I'd like everyone to cast their mind back to the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. I'm sure most of you here will have heard either myself, Megan, or someone else from the IBAT team tell you about the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. It contains an assessment for each of those species, which details threats as well as spatial data for each of those. And I want to introduce the STAR metric as part of something that you could use for further site-based analysis of your impacts and dependencies. STAR uses the threat data as well as the spatial data from the red list. And the way that it works by is easiest to explain through an example. So if we start by defining your area of interest, this could be a mining operation site or another operational site, plus an appropriate buffer around. Megan's already taken you through some information on buffers too. And the way that STAR works is it calculates the range overlap of threatened species within that site. So let's take species 1 that's highlighted on the slide there. 5% of species 1's population is within that area of interest as defined by the range overlap. This is then weighted by the fact that species 1 is endangered, and those combine to give a threat abatement score of 15, contributing to that total of 63. And the STAR threat abatement score works by stacking all of the species on top of each other to give you the total threat abatement for that site. And this score, or this value, is how much the company can quantifiably reduce global extinction risk to the species that are present there. So how does IBAT show the STAR values in a report? Obviously, the STAR report is about taking a high-level impact or dependency and trying to take it into something that is actionable. So we have a STAR report, a sample for the Kinabatangan River in Borneo here, where you can see that this site has a breakdown of which threats affect the species in that site most. There are some caveats to STAR's data. So first of all, it only includes mammals, amphibians, and birds. And the reason that we do that is for accuracy, because these are the best studied species within the red list data set. The other assumption that's really key to understanding this output is that it assumes that threat pressures apply evenly across that species range. Things like borders, different regulations across a national or international border, or the threat not being distributed evenly across that range could affect what is present on the ground versus what is reported within this STAR report. But that's what the STAR report is. It's the start of that funnel from a high-level biodiversity data down to an on-the-ground action plan or mitigation. Because STAR is the main way that we aim to help businesses understand how they can impact species extinction risk, we have a lot of innovation coming shortly on the IBAT side to improve our offering through STAR. We have 2 other reports that you can do on a site that you've already assessed through your disclosure preparation report to inform next steps or more information. First, we have the PS6 and ESRS report. It's essentially very similar to one of our straightforward proximity reports, but the buffers are locked. Rather than you being able to choose the buffers are predetermined as set by the IFC and World Bank standards to meet the PS6 and ESRS standard. It also has an additional element. Rather than just telling you the presence of protected areas, key biodiversity areas, and the IUCN Red List species there, it also contains a layer that screens for critical habitat in line with the IFC's Performance Standard 6 for things like Alliance for Zero Extinction sites or UNESCO World Heritage sites where there's likely to be critical habitat. Finally, we have our freshwater report. So this is a really useful report for screening how you might impact threatened species that are freshwater, both up and downstream from one of your operational sites. Examples I've heard in the past are things like a nuclear power station where the water temperature that's being returned to a river after it's used for cooling in a plant is a couple degrees warmer. Things like a sewage treatment works where potentially there's still some bacteria residing in that effluent that's going back into the water. And you can use this report to screen both upstream and downstream up to 150 kilometers to see the impact of the potential impact you have on red list species within the water. Finally, you can actually access IBAT's data in its raw form and do your own bespoke analysis to understand it better. First of all, we have our core data download. The core data download consists of the IUCN red list of threatened species spatial data. So you can see in this example we have in orange that this species doesn't have a full range map, but instead has point data to represent where the species resides. You also have the world database on protected area shapefiles, world database of key biodiversity area shapefiles too. All of this can inform on-the-ground management plans or try to take next steps. We have the derived dataset too, which is our other dataset, other GIS download that is available. And you can see here the star scores for a site. And again, this can help inform which species and which threats are most important to your operation. Finally, I wanted to highlight the importance and relevance of all of IBAT's data to the private sector. Why should you guys care? As has already been taken through by Rebecca, IBAT is widely referenced across regulations, frameworks, and standards. And the second point is reputational risk. If you have bad news stories reflecting impacts you've had on the environment, it can harm your social license to operate and continue to work as a company in those areas. And this includes operations near key biodiversity areas, protected areas, and threatened species. Licenses can end up being revoked from this social pressure. IBAT data is also used to expand protected areas. So key biodiversity areas are a really great indicator because it comes from the IUCN Red List. So you have threatened species creating a key biodiversity area, and then that area is then signaling for regulators to protect it. So you have a flow through the IBAT datasets where you can have key biodiversity areas being an early warning to a business that this area will be protected in the future, reducing your regulatory risk by avoiding these sites early. Finance requirements. Some companies are financed, project-based financed, and using the IFC Performance Standard 6 and World Bank Standard ESRS 6, critical habitat layer screening, you're able to align with these standards to make sure you are doing your due diligence before applying for these projects. We have many multilateral development banks that use IBAT for this function. Finally, IBAT is very useful for prioritizing resources to the most important places across your portfolio of value chain for biodiversity. At current, only 43% of KBAs are within protected areas or OECMs. I'll now hand on to Jake to tell you how you can access IBAT data, and including the disclosure preparation report.
Thanks, Mark, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Mark said, I'd like to talk you through how you and your organisations can access the IBAT platform if you haven't already done so, and gain access to the various reports that Megan and Mark have taken you through today. The IBAT platform acts as a cost recovery system for our data sets. So we've got the World Database of Key Biodiversity Areas, the World Database of Protected Areas, and the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, which means there are costs associated with using IBAT as a private organisation. There are a number of subscriptions and pay-as-you-go options to choose from depending on requirements for your organisation. When you sign up, we allow unlimited users per organisation, so you can set up the whole team. The limitations come from each tier, come from the number of reports and data that you can download from that. So just to quickly take you through them, we have a free option. So hopefully most of you have managed to sign up to a free profile, but if you haven't, please do. It's a great way to get familiarized with the platform and the data sets that we work with. So with that, you'll get the visual data map displaying protected areas, key biodiversity areas, the IUCN red list of threatened species, the star layer with a 50-kilometer resolution and rarity weighted species richness. You'll be able to use pay-as-you-go downloads for reports, and you can upload and save various locations on the visual data map. Moving to basic, this is the first option where you can download reports that Mark's taking you through. So you've got 10 proximity reports there, as well as access to the site catalog. Then when we look across to Pro, Enterprise, and Enterprise Plus, these will be the most important ones for the people attending, hopefully, as you are attending a disclosure preparation report, as these are the categories where disclosure preparation reports are included. So starting off with Pro, you have a whole host of reports that Mark took you through earlier. And importantly, the one disclosure preparation report for up to 300 sites there. Move up to Enterprise. You can then download unlimited, you get unlimited GIS downloads if your organization utilizes that facility. Unlimited PS6, ESS6 reports, proximity reports, freshwater reports, and star reports. And you get 3 disclosure preparation reports for up to 1,000 sites each on that one. Enterprise Plus is our most comprehensive subscription channel. So this pretty much grants you access to everything. So you get unlimited GIS downloads, you get unlimited disclosure reports, and it adds access to our API. So you can get the data into your systems and have that updated regularly when we update that on our platform. Moving across to pay-as-you-go, we also have pay-as-you-go options where organizations and consultancies can pay for one-off downloads, including GIS information, disclosure preparation reports, and single report and multi-site reports. Of various sizes. Payment options vary across the pay-as-you-go and the annual subscription. So we can, for the pay-as-you-go option, we can use credit cards, or we can raise an invoice, or for the subscription tiers, we require a commercial license agreement signed by both organizations, IBAT and yourselves. So yeah, as mentioned before, IBAT is a cost recovery mechanism to support the core databases as they're provided by our alliance partners, BirdLife International, Conservation International, the IUCN, and UNEP WCMC. Proceeds are spread across those organizations to maintain and progress their research. So as you can imagine, the costs attributed to these databases are significant. So funds we're able to allocate to the alliance partners go a long way to assist them and organizations such as yourselves who are looking for this data to measure your impact on biodiversity. The funding we can deliver back to the alliance helps improve both the data sets and the IBAT application, so we can evolve those with your needs. So just to give you an indication of our progress so far, we have over 30,000 users across 250 global organizations, and we have worked on analysing over 600,000 sites for biodiversity risk, and have been able to redistribute $5.5 million back to our alliance partners to maintain the database. So just to summarize, IBAT can help manage your interface with nature and can be used to respond to several key regulations, frameworks, and standards. The datasets within IBAT and IBAT itself are developed and managed by 4 of the most authoritative global conservation organizations: BirdLife International, Conservation International, the IUCN, and UNEP WCMC. That's the presentation over. Everyone can relax. So I'd like to move everyone to the Q&A section. So I can see if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A area. I can see a couple of people have already asked questions, so I might distribute these out to various people. So the first one I might direct to you, Megan. I can see a question from Miriam. Can you give an example of where there is an area no as per CSRD criteria while it is ecologically sensitive? Yes, I think that's referring to the CSV.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thanks, Miriam. So Yes, there is. I don't have the example at the top of my head, but Mark, I think you have a sample of this instance where it's actually, yeah, yes and no. So Mark, you can go.
Thanks, Megan. So yeah, as you asked in the question, essentially you were asking for an example where the site was assessed as not sensitive through CSRD, which excludes STAR, but was ecologically sensitive otherwise. So if we look at this mock site within our sample DPR, you can see it is in Thailand. I'll go slowly so we can go, but we can see that it is sensitive for GRI and TNFD, but not for CSRD. And I'll just quickly run through the breakdown for that. So you can see it is a risk prone area for CSRD, but isn't ecologic. It wasn't defined as biodiversity sensitive. The reason for this is because it has no protected areas and no key biodiversity areas within its buffer of 10 kilometers for construction. However, it did have a high significance for star. So that high significance for star meant that it was sensitive for GRI and TNFD's definition, but for the CSRD definition, which doesn't include species at that point, it was defined as not sensitive. Yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Mark. I will move on to a question from Emma. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Do you allow single sign-on? Are any banks using this tool for portfolio analysis? And do you have data layers showing the location of companies/assets? Bank requires this data. I'll pass that to Megan or Mark.
Mark
Yeah.
can go.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take this one as well. So at the moment, we don't have single sign-on. And the reason that we don't have single sign-on is because that places all of the security onus on IBAT, and with loads of different standards, such as I'm probably going to get this wrong, the ISO 002701 standard versus another one. There's not one single standard that all companies use. So instead, we place the onus on managing your own IBAT users to the user themselves. So you have an IBAT admin that can add and remove members of your organization, and then you can manage that for security. We also are penetration tested because obviously you're uploading sensitive data into the platform. So we have an annual penetration test, and we have a whole host of other security credentials, which I can share to answer specific questions. The second part of your question is, are any banks using this tool for portfolio analysis? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. So IBAT's use cases are generally broken down into three. You have one that's trying to understand the potential risks that they pose to biodiversity through their direct operations, such as mining, renewable energies, or something like that. You have use case number two, which is reporting. CSRD, TNFD, GRI, SBTN are all using IBAT data. And then finally, we have this financial risk. How much am I exposed financially because of the biodiversity risks within my portfolio? And the answer to that is yes, we have many banks, and they have been a key sector in IBAT even from early in its development. And the final question is, do you have any data layers showing the location of companies or assets? Banks require this data. So IBAT does not share companies' uploaded data with other companies. So you would have to know the location of that asset to assess the risk. However, we do have a collaborator that's really popular within the financial sphere, which is called RepRisk. And if you hold both a RepRisk subscription and an IBAT subscription, you can access IBAT's spatial data biodiversity element for the companies which you're assessing through RepRisk. So you can see a financial biodiversity lens in terms of risk for the companies that you work with. Thank you. I'll hand back to Jake.
Thank you, Mark. We have a question. Do you have an option to get data for a linear infrastructure? Megan, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, so for linear infrastructures, so like I showed earlier, there are multiple ways that you can actually upload your site locations or your projects. So let's say you have a transmission line, you can actually just draw a line on the data map itself and upload it as a project. Or similarly, if you have a linear infrastructure, and you have it in a shapefile format, you can upload it. So I would recommend that if you have the shapefile, just upload the shapefile of that linear infrastructure instead of using coordinates, because if you use coordinates, it's just looking at that one point location itself.
Cool. Thank you, Megan. So I have a question on the pricing and see if there's any cheaper offers for smaller businesses. Mark, I'll pass it on over to you.
So thanks, Jake. So for smaller businesses, we do have pay-as-you-go options that you can take out one report at a time. Or you can take one of the lower end subscriptions as well. But the other part of your question is asking why biodiversity data from IBAT is, in your words, expensive. The reason that IBAT data is expensive is because of the ground truth nature of this data. The IUCN Red List is collected by thousands of scientists doing on-the-ground monitoring to search for these species to then upload the shape files. There's a huge cost associated with managing these data sets. In 2016, it was estimated to be 6.5 million US dollars per year just to maintain the data sets in their current form. To get the data sets to the standard that everyone would like them to be, where they can really strongly inform site-based analysis, would cost a further 114 million US dollars. And unfortunately for data, it's not furry and it's not charming, like some of our more popular conservation funding targets, like pandas and lions, where it's easy to raise charismatic and enigmatic species funds. For data, it's not the same thing. So that's why it's really crucial that IBAT generates the source of sustainable funding to be able to maintain and update these data sets.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark. So I think I've got a final question here. How does IBAT recognize or get information and update this platform about local protection? Megan?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about local protection and also local data sets, I think we should look at the three data sets separately. So we have protected areas. So I think about 80 to 90% of the protected areas are actually submitted by national governments. So that can be your Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Forestry in your own countries. And then what they do is they actually analyze their own data or analyze their own country and then submit these protected areas to the Protected Planets team, which is hosted by UNEP WCMC. So why governments are so concerned about protected areas is because protected areas is also the headline indicator for Target 3 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And then we move on to KBAs. So for key biodiversity areas, how we ensure local coverage is that there are national coordination groups around the world. So national coordination groups are the ones who are actually looking or analyzing sites in that certain country or region. And then what they do is that they identify areas which are important for biodiversity, which matches the KBA criteria, etc. And then they collate that information and send it to KBA Secretariat, which is under BirdLife International in the UK. For species, like Mark has also spoken on a bit earlier, there's a lot of that ground truth data sets that you have to get. So for species information, it really depends on who's on the ground to collect the data, what kind of research papers you look through, and all this information that you would gather from a local or from a on-site area before you actually submit it and before it makes it onto the IUCN Red List, which is managed by IUCN. That being said, there is still a caveat that all these are global data sets. We recognize that there are sometimes discrepancies between the global and the local data sets. So what we do highly encourage and recommend for our users is that they can start with IBAT. So start with a global data set, analyze your locations. That gives you that overall understanding of all your sites. And then from there on, you can actually consider maybe prioritizing the top few locations that you're looking at. That can be 10, it can be 20, it can be 100, and then run that through local data sets as well. So just to make sure that you cover all grounds of looking at both the global, but also going down to look at the local level data set.
Amazing. Thanks, Megan. So I said that last question was the last question, but it's clearly sparked some intrigue from other people. So I've got a couple more. So Mark, I think I'll direct this one to you. Can IBAT manage or distinguish between Emerald and Natura 2000 networks?
Thanks, Jake. So IBAT absolutely can distinguish between these different types of protected area. So when you run a disclosure preparation report, within that report data, you have one of the tabs, which is for the protected areas. And that protected area has three different categories of designation. So not only can you separate Emerald Network from Natura 2000, you can actually separate between the individual types of Natura 2000, such as the sites of community important or SCI, the special areas of conservation or SACs, as well as the SPAs or special protection areas too. So you can easily separate and then manage the output and decide which ones you want to focus on. Thanks, Jake.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I'll say a provisional final question on this one from an anonymous attendee. How do you ensure confidentiality and security as we have to upload sensitive data such as assets or projects? Good question. I will pass that over to Mark once again.
Yeah. Thanks for your question. That's a really great one, and I'm glad that I get to highlight this. So IBAT security is very strong because we understand that you guys are uploading really sensitive data about operations, planned operations, and direct operational data. So all of the users' private data is encrypted within the IBAT database. Specifically, site names as well as the geometries are encrypted and decrypted exclusively by the production application when you generate a report or create an intersect geometry. Users' passwords are also encrypted within the production teams not having access to them. We use an SSL certificate to protect all data in transit over the web app. Obviously, I've mentioned before about the access control. So you have admins, and you can also use multi-factor authentication, and you have to comply with our strict password creation policy. Finally, we have good data handling policies. Every report and GIS data download is provided after the creation of a one-time link, which is put in the resource section of our production's Amazon Web Services bucket. As mentioned in the data encryption point, all private data is anonymized, as well as the resources including the resources uploaded to Amazon Web Services. IBAT's infrastructure is hosted on Akamai, Linode, and Amazon Web Services, widely used and trusted cloud service providers. Finally, production infrastructure is backed up daily and kept for 30 days. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Mark. I think that's it. So I want to thank everyone for their questions. They were really great questions. But if you do have any questions following this or anything pops up later in your mind, please do not worry about emailing us at any time. One of the team will get back to you. But I'll pass you over to Megan.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Thanks everyone for joining, as Jake has mentioned. I hope you have learned a bit more about IBAT and also mainly the disclosure preparation report and how it can help you with your nature-related reporting. As Jake has said, if you have any questions at all after this, feel free to reach out to the IBAT team and we'll be happy to support you. And if you would like a copy of this presentation and these slides, also feel free to reach out to us. And we will also try to put this recording of the webinar on our website. So if you know of anyone else, can be your team, your colleagues who are interested to watch this webinar, then feel free to head over to our website. So thank you again all for your time today. And yes, we are always here to help. So feel free to reach out if you have anything after this.